In July of 1518, a woman stepped into a quiet street in Strasbourg and began to sway. There was no festival, and there was no music. She danced until her feet bled. When she collapsed from exhaustion, she lay there only long enough to catch her breath, stood back up, and continued moving. Her name was Frau Trophäa, and she did this for hours. People walking by stopped to watch her thrash and turn, elevating an isolated, bizarre action into a neighborhood spectacle. She was trapped in an involuntary physical loop that overrode the normal limits of human endurance. The situation escalated when the audience started joining her. One by one, bystanders stepped into the street and locked into the exact same unbroken rhythm. Their faces were blank. With jerking limbs and sweat pouring down their bodies in the summer heat, they moved as if their nervous systems had been hijacked. Within a week, dozens of citizens were thrashing in the streets. Within a month, the crowd swelled to 400 people. Because they could not physically command themselves to stop moving, they danced until their bodies began to fail. City officials realized they were no longer dealing with a localized disturbance. They had a rapidly expanding, fatal epidemic on their hands, and absolutely no idea where it came from. The authorities brought in doctors, who diagnosed the affliction as a fever of hot blood. Their solution was straightforward. The afflicted needed to literally dance the fever out of their systems. The city cleared out 2 local guild halls and constructed massive wooden stages. They even hired professional musicians and backup dancers to keep the tempo moving. Instead of burning out the fever, the constant music acted as a beacon. The rhythmic drumming drew even more citizens into the trance, trapping them on the stage. This graph shows the result of that decision. Exhaustion triggered heart attacks and strokes, and at its peak, the mass compulsion killed up to 15 people every single day. By formalizing the compulsion, the city's medical intervention effectively endorsed it. A strange illness had transformed into a lethal, state-sponsored performance. For centuries, the leading theory blamed ergot, a toxic hallucinogenic mold that grows on damp rye. The physiology rules that out. Ergot poisoning restricts blood flow to the extremities. It causes spasms, but it makes coordinated, rhythmic movement difficult. You cannot trip on ergot and dance on beat for days straight. Modern historians point to a psychological cause, known as mass psychogenic illness. This illness needs extreme environmental stress. Starvation, smallpox, and syphilis terrified Strasbourg in 1518. They also believed St. Vitus forced sinners to dance. Seeing someone act out that curse created such psychological pressure that it manifested as a physical symptom. The dancers were not infected by mold or bacteria. They were consumed by a terrifying idea that short-circuited their nervous systems. Realizing their mistake, the city abruptly reversed course. They tore down the stages, dismissed the musicians, and banned all public dancing. Authorities loaded the remaining victims into wagons and carried them into the hills to a shrine dedicated to St. Vitus, where they were instructed to pray for forgiveness. The intervention worked. By treating the theological fear directly, the city broke the psychological loop. The dancing slowly faded out. The exact numbers and details will always remain slightly obscured by the 5 centuries of history separating us from that summer. But the event leaves behind a disturbing reality. Put a group of people under enough stress, and a shared belief can spread through the crowd like a literal virus. The human mind possesses the raw power to fatally override the human body.